the scale of the coverage and the comparison that my godchild made was with the 200 children missing from UK government asylum centres. They went missing, mostly of Albanian origin. They went missing in January, I think, and no one seemed to care much. There was a little bit of movement on that story yesterday. And I completely understood this, what would you call it? This juxtaposition of stories. I completely understood the emotional investment in this juxtaposition of stories, and I tried to explain that and it was a clumsy conversation. I didn't do a very good job of explaining it. So I thought I'd ask you to. You need to explain to someone who is righteously furious. Not that this story here got so much coverage, but that it got so much more than the 200 children, I think the figure's come down a bit since January, who have disappeared. Some of them almost certainly sort of trafficked, spirited into criminal gangs. I mean, a story that should push all sorts of red top tabloid buttons or Daily Mail shaped buttons, shouldn't it? I mean, it's a story that really should push buttons. And yet the conspiracy of silence is, frankly, deafening.
I'm afraid I'm incredibly cynical. I also live. I've got two teenagers.
Yes,
we've had similar conversations.
Have you?
And I think it boils down to one is easy journalism and one is more in-depth journalism. And the submarine story, as sad and as heartbreaking as it is, was either going to have one of two outcomes. It was either going to be wonderfully successful, or very, very heartbreaking for the families involved. And so it's easy to follow, easy to report on. You're getting constant updates, which makes it really, really straightforward to, hit a new headline if you need to, for time and online and digital media. And it's not that we don't care. We do care. We do desperately care. Of course we do. The second you say it, it's immediately obvious. However, you require months and months of research. No one knows where the children are. You're not going to instantly find an answer or in 4 hours have a change in the situation that allows you to update your headlines. And so it's simply on that level.
How do you prove that you can? I mean, is this your conversations at home have been similar to the one I had, presumably?
Yeah.
How do you prove?
Yeah.
How do you prove that we, as a collective, as a society, as a country, how do you prove that we care as much about those children as these adults?
Well, you point to the charities that are trying to support.
Yes.
You point to our social care system. You point to the fact that we are even having these conversations. And then you say to the teenagers, it's up to you. You are going to be the future journalists. You are going to be the future newspaper editors. You have online content that you could write today. Use your voice. And the fact that we're even having these conversations shows that we care. And I think that is what
you did a better job than me.
Have to stick to.
You did. No, hand on heart, you did a better job than me, actually.
Well, thank you for that.
The point I wanted to make, and it's a really uncomfortable point, about the children, is that when I remember hearing it, first of all, it was reported that these were refugee children, like illegal refugee. I hate that expression.
Right.
But these were illegal refugee children. And I'm just going to postulate that perhaps it doesn't run into a right-wing media narrative to get into humanising refugees.
Or portraying them as vulnerable or even human beings that we should care about.
Exactly, because it doesn't run into the narrative of the fifth pledge of Stop the Boat. It doesn't run into... If you start making these real people, like we welcome the Ukrainian people, because, and I'm really sorry to say this, because they look like us, if we were running with that kind of narrative, it's not in the sort of right-wing media's interest. And it sounds so callous. But
I mean, it's accurate. You can't pretend that the dehumanising of people crossing in small boats hasn't happened at the very highest level of government and all over the media. You just can't. I mean, even the word illegal, as you've alluded to, is itself dehumanising. You're no longer a person. You are an illegal. And it's not, I don't think, a particularly callous leap from one to the other. So any other category of children in the United Kingdom who went missing on this scale would draw not as much attention as the submarine story, because the submarine story has blockbuster elements to it, but would draw a hell of a lot more attention than the disappearance of a couple of hundred asylum-seeking children.
I completely. I mean, it makes me sick to my stomach that could well be a possibility. I mean, I think a caller said this earlier, that if this was, let's say, an international tour of school bus or something of Eton children, kids going to Eton College or Harrow. Or
local comprehensive school as well. I think you'd get more. You would get more coverage of Eton or Harrow or the school that I went to, Ampleforth, because you'd have famous parents or wealthy landowners, and for some reason, and this again isn't a criticism; it's just a statement of fact. We are gossip fans. We've always liked the humans like gossip, and so stories involving people that we've heard of are more interesting than stories involving people that we haven't.
You can't make people care, James.
No.
You can't make people care, and you've just alluded to it there. And the Titan story, the submersive business, is such an anomalous story, wrapped up in such intrigue, and you've got the billionaires, and you've got the morbid curiosity. It's clickable, James.
Yeah, great word.
Media are going to push it out there. I mean, Piers did 3.6 million clicks in 24 hours, and that's ridiculous, right? That, for my money, speaks to the human fallacy that people were searching for this content and clicking on it.
And this is why this is not a judgmental conversation in any way, shape or form. Elements of it will be uncomfortable. Chris's contribution highlighting that. But it is it's brutal, actually, Cameron. It's just more interesting. That's the long and the short of it, James. And you want to do one of these where you're almost putting the mirror up at society, right? This is all that we're doing. If 3.6 million people were searching and watching for this sort of content over the last 24 hours, then that's all that you need to know. Like, it was just a very good story. One of the rare ones that had everything, intrigue. Rich people were down there, billionaires. A countdown, there's a countdown in people's heads as they're watching it, the oxygen running out. What would you do if you were in that situation? Everyone's had that conversation.
James, it's the perfect story, mate. And then you've got the romanticism of the Titanic, the heritage, and what happened so many years ago. It's the perfect
Would
story.
Would that persuade a 15-year-old? Can you remember being 15 and putting the world to rights and convinced of your own moral righteousness? I don't know it would, because the 15-year-old would say, but that's disgusting.
But the question that you pose back to the 15-year-old is, which one of those videos did you watch, 15-year-old? Because I'm sure that 9 times out of 10 they were clicking on the top.
Yeah, I'm sure 9 times out of 10 I came up with one of the 1 out of 10. But also then society's disgusting.
Well, this is the point, James, and how do you cure for the ills of society? You go back to education and all that other stuff, but you can't teach. No,
not in the moment. I like your opening line. You can't make people care. I nodded along with it. I'm not sure. Do you not think that there could be a higher level of concern about these missing children? If the story had been handled differently, never going to get close to the level of interest in the missing submersive. We can all agree about that. But you could certainly have a lot more interest in 154 missing and potentially exploited children if it was reported differently, no?
Oh, I'd reword your question, James, ever so slightly. We should have a greater level of concern. But again, we're going back to that thing about...
No, we're not. I'm asking you if it could be engendered.
Oh, James, it's... People aren't clicking on the story. This is the chicken and the egg.
No, they're not. But we're doing chicken and egg now, or clicking an egg. That's quite good. Clicking an egg. I think people would. I mean, if you'd had stories about these children in the fortnight after they disappeared, if you'd had pictures, and I think that I don't know. Actually, it's like we're clashing with Chris's point now. That so many people have been conditioned not to care about them because they had come here in small boats. It's interesting.
James, what you're doing then, you're going back to the concept of the other, and this harps back to bloody Wuthering Heights and Heathcliff, right? That's what you're talking about, though, James. It's very, very difficult to make people care about, and this is me talking as the son of Jamaican migrants, right? It's very difficult to make people care about people, nameless, anonymous people,
Yes.
that do not look like them. You always have this feeling of hope, and there are so many things where this could go, right?
Yes.
So, like, are they dead? Are they not dead? Are they trapped? And when they're going to be released, there is going to be a huge celebration, and there's going to be a great success for humanity, and all of that. And now we look at the other side, and we look at the kids, and the problem here is, deep down, you know what happened to these kids. Yeah. And I do. And everyone does. And where did it happen? It didn't happen at the bottom of the Atlantic, because that's far away. I don't have any power at the bottom of the Atlantic, but it happened on our watch, because it happened on the watch of the people who we elected, right? So it happened under our own eyes, right? It happened right here. And that's a really uncomfortable thing.
So we look the other way. About. I mean, I guess decent people don't look the other way. Slightly less decent people look the other way with a sense of guilt and shame. And then people like Susan, who's texted, stare the story right in the face, and she says they are here illegally, they shouldn't be here, and that's why we don't care about them. It's a fact. Well, it's clearly a fact in Susan's mind, but obviously in your mind and my mind, they are children. They are not illegals. And also, they're awaiting their asylum application, so it's a factually incorrect fact as well, as well as an emotionally repellent one.
The thing about the submersible was that it's a very, very immediate story, and above all, certainly for me, it was the sheer appalling horror of the idea of them slowly asphyxiating, which is what they would have done.
So that's what I meant by imagining what you'd do. You could you can't really imagine being a 15-year-old Albanian teenager who's disappeared from a asylum centre in Sussex, but you can absolutely imagine being stuck in a submersible in the North Atlantic, watching the oxygen levels deplete, can't you?
Yes, I mean, it's beyond horror. And, it was happening then. The thing about the poor little kids is they're all scattered. We've no idea where they are. If it had been picked up at the outset, and some journalists had gone into it,
they tried,
and put
but it's not going to get the coverage. If it had been reported like an abduction, like a mass abduction, and the numbers and the faces were right out there.
Yeah. I mean, when they are rehumanized, like that poor little soul, in his best clothes, dead on a beach. Yeah. Alan, somebody, wasn't it, years ago? Then everybody's interested.
For a news cycle or two.
Well, yes, exactly. And you can't get around the way the refugees have been absolutely systematically dehumanized. I mean, that is obvious and.
Yeah, and it's strange for a Christian country. Thank you, Rose.